Welcome to the Mental Health Bootcamp podcast.
Woohoo!
This is the podcast where three Canadian psychotherapists, fourth psychotherapist altogether, three of us Canadian, one of us American, serve you cutting edge mental health knowledge. I am Dr. Ryan Howes, a clinical psychologist from Pasadena, California.
I'm Dr. Brooke Lewis, a registered clinical counselor from the Greater Vancouver area.
I'm Chris Boyd, psychotherapist from Coquitlam.
And I'm Joanna. I'm not Joanna. But yeah, Joanna's not with us today.
You had us fooled there. You had us fooled.
You did have us fooled. Sounded a lot like Joanna, Chris's sister, who is not with us today. She's doing other important business. But the trio here, we can take care of this. We can handle this, I'm sure.
Yeah, Joanna might be away for a few weeks for all the Joanna fans. She is taking a course on the evenings that we record this. So
yeah,
we will be back, but it might be a little while.
It'd be a 6-week hiatus.
Yeah.
Is it 6 weeks?
6 or 7 weeks, yeah.
7 weeks, but today's the first of the 7th. So.
All right. So next week we start the auditions for who's the next Joanna. We kick her off the island and find someone else for this spot, right?
Sure.
Sure.
That'd be like a really random podcast interviewing Joanna replacements.
That'd be great. I think that would be riveting listening, I'm sure.
Yeah. Esther Perel.
Oh.
Edith Egger.
Brene Brown. I thought
Joe Court. Oh, Joe Court.
Oh, good old Joe.
Yeah. Be a lot of options.
Thomas Birdspell.
Oh, Thomas.
Well, so you guys been doing okay? Everything okay in Canada?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Anything interesting you did this week? Anything, I don't know, active?
Christopher?
No. I'm wearing a t-shirt for those watching our YouTube channel for a 5K run that Brooke and I actually did last Saturday. So it's called, it's for the Terminator Foundation based out of Alberta. And they help those who are dealing with substance use and addiction. They support them with training and running a triathlon or completing a triathlon. So they have these 5K dashes or 5K runs across Canada now, just for awareness and a bit of fundraising. So some friends of ours are putting it on or supporting the whole initiative. So we thought we'd go check it out. They just had the first one here in Vancouver.
Yeah, it was a perfect day for it. It wasn't too anything. Like it was a little cloudy, a little sunny. The day before was monsoon rains. We hit like rain records on Friday. So I think everyone was a little nervous for Saturday morning, but worked out well, very, very well. The park we were running in had another group there that were doing time trials for like track. And those guys were like intense.
Yeah.
I think it was cross country, but I think cross country's come a long way since I tried cross country many years ago, but they were like sprinting through the park. So coming towards us on the same trail.
Like so fast.
Yeah.
So incredible. Like these people were like athletes. Very like you didn't expect to see it like in just this random park in the middle of the suburbs on a Saturday morning. I felt like they needed like a bell or a horn or something, like I'm coming.
Yeah.
They were flying through.
Lucky there was no collisions, my goodness.
Yeah.
Yes. Those cross-country runners getting faster and faster. Well, it sounds like it was for a great cause, and I think it's really interesting, for these kids, not just saying don't do drugs, but saying do triathlons instead. Here's train for this. Make it a goal. Get your endorphins going this way. I think it's really a cool idea.
Yeah.
The hard work and determination. Yeah. Go ahead, Brooke.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, reiterate. We talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but yeah, just being able to help them as well focus on how to take care of your body, right? So this foundation offers like coaching. They hook them up with physiotherapy, I think massage therapy, maybe even dietitian. So like they're really teaching them about their body, about health, about overcoming things, and endurance, strength. It's amazing. Is quite interesting.
Sounds great. I love the sound of it.
Yeah, so check them out. Terminator Foundation out of Alberta, Canada.
There you go. All of our international listeners, here you go to know what is going on in Alberta and all across Canada, I suppose, Canada-wide. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. One little plug I want to make right now, which is this Saturday is National Psychotherapy Day.
Whoa.
Hey,
I'll say International Psychotherapy Day, really, because it's worldwide. So International Psychotherapy Day, and the whole point of Psychotherapy Day is to kind of demystify psychotherapy, make it more accessible. And all we're asking people to do this year is just, if you've been in therapy, tell someone about it. Hey, I've been in therapy. Here's what helped. Or, here's what I liked about it. Here's what I didn't like. Or I've been in therapy a few times. If people who have gone could just talk about it a little more openly, I think it would really do a lot to decrease any sort of a stigma about therapy, because I think a lot more people have gone than talk about it. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So that's something you can do any day, but we've just established one day because why not? Why not have one day where we focus on this stuff? So
that's a great call to action, Ryan.
Thank you.
Share my therapy experience with others, either verbally or through social media. Maybe I'll even send my therapist a card.
You could do that. You could do that, I suppose. It wouldn't hurt.
She wouldn't be expecting it, that's for sure.
There we go. Well, I think we should just go ahead and do the topic for the night, right? I mean,
let's do it.
You're not going to join us, so.
Okay, Ryan, it's you.
It is me. It's me. It's my topic. I'm going to share it with you guys. I think we could have some fun with this. Are you scared?
Yeah.
You're scared because you're not really sure what it is, right? I don't know.
Apprehensive. I'm pretty apprehensive.
Okay. Well, apprehension, that's fine here. We can handle that emotion. All right. I'm sending it to myself. Ready? Okay. Here we go. What are the classic defense mechanisms? Why do we have them? And what can we do about them? Are defense mechanisms always bad?
Hi, Steve. Who are
Steve,
you?
how's it going?
Nice to
everybody.
see you.
I was just playing Missile Command, and then I ended up here. I don't know what happened. Hello, everybody.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Chris.
Hey, everybody. This is my good friend, Dr. Steven Simpson, who is a full professor of psychology at Fuller Graduate School of Psychology in Pasadena, California. He's been there for decades now. Been there as a student and then been there as a professor for a long, long time. He's a fixture of the place. It's true.
Like I'm a statue or a piece of furniture.
Or a fancy lamp. Yeah.
He is the author of 4 books,
Oh.
all critically acclaimed. One of them he let me tag on, so that was kind of nice of him. And just a heck of a guy, and also happens to know a lot about defense mechanisms. So good to have Dr. Steven Simpson. Let's give him a round of applause.
Welcome.
Thanks for allowing me to drop in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we appreciate having you.
Thank you. So we're going to talk about those defense mechanisms.
Yeah, that's what I thought we'd talk about. I don't know. Maybe you guys, Chris, maybe Brooke, maybe you'd rather talk about it. We can just leave Steve out of it. What do you think?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I think we should loop Steve in. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely, we should loop him in.
You wouldn't want to compartmentalize me or anything like that.
No.
Right?
You don't want to do that, no. Or overanalyze it or avoid this conversation.
There we go.
Right.
I'll just throw out there also that Steve is he's not only a professor, he teaches a lot of classes there, but one of the main areas he focuses on is psychodynamic psychotherapy. So
Oh, great.
this is where the concept of the defense mechanisms came from. Freud actually came up with them in the first place, and
Right.
depending on who you ask, there may be 10 defense mechanisms, there may be 25. They're all over the place. So, Steve, what can you tell us about this stuff? I don't expect a lecture, but I'm just curious.
Okay. I'll try and keep my full lecture under wraps, but it's, I was actually thinking Psychotherapy Day is coming up, right? International Psychotherapy Day is coming up, and where the mission is to kind of make psychology feel more accessible. I like talking about defense mechanisms in a way that makes them seem a little less weird. And just because there's a lot of psychoanalysis, especially with the language that gets used a lot of the time, it's, very big words. They can be a mouthful. A lot of it can make psychoanalysis seem almost a little cult-like, when really it's actually based on a lot of science and a lot of scientific thought. And so understanding something like how a defense mechanism fits in with that, it can actually help people in a weird way. And I'll get to this, but it's like, can help empathy, that kind of thing. I could keep going.
Please do.
Okay.
You have the stage, man. Go for it.
So I think this is a good way maybe to lead into it. So I was reading an article about, it was for a health magazine about defense mechanisms, and I had a pretty big problem with it. It was fine and kind of generally defining the different defense mechanisms, but they kept using the word choose repeatedly. The person, will choose to remove emotion during intellectualization. The person will choose to take out their feelings on their spouse after they have a hard day of work. And that's a real misrepresentation of what defense mechanisms are, because they're not choices. They're actually their survival reflexes that basically defend the human animal from the threats of a civilized society. And yes, so they're actually more like reflexes. So let me give you an example. Denial, just one of the most fundamental, most common. Everybody knows what it is, right? Well, when we were animals or apes or whatever once upon a time, we had a fight or flight mechanism that would, when we were in danger, we'd follow. So we would either attack something that was threatening us, or we would run away. Well, once we started farming and sitting down for jobs and all that stuff like that, we can't really do that anymore. So let's say I am a 2-year-old and my father is an alcoholic and he's got explosive anger. Well, I can't run away. I certainly can't fight him. What do? My brain, because my little 2-year-old brain can't handle the intensity of what happens, it cooks up this sort of thing, a defense mechanism, to create a wall between the horror of what I go through and everyday reality. So you can plop me down in front of the television and come ask me, how are you, honey? And I'll be like, I'm fine. And here's the thing though, I'll really feel fine. I'll actually think that I am fine. And so these things are actually survival skills that we develop as kids. And then the problems that we run into is they when we're older and we're not in literal emotional danger anymore, those survival mechanisms don't serve us as well. So if my wife comes to me and says, I feel like we need to work on our communication, or we're not spending enough time together, then it's possible that in this scenario, someone who went through what I just described would genuinely respond with, things are fine. I don't understand. I don't understand what you're talking about, just because it's this old kind of coping mechanism that I don't want to say learned, more like they experienced, more like an instinct. I'll say this, wrap up my little spiel here. Freud, one of the things that doesn't get talked about with Freud a lot is that he was incredibly influenced by Darwin. Everybody around the turn of the 19th, 20th century was hugely influenced by Darwin. And so the idea of preservation of the species through survival, survival of the fittest, is something that was very interesting to Freud. I actually got lucky and on a trip for Fuller to London. I got to drop by Freud's last home in London, and he's got you can see in his office the books and the artifacts he has. He was very interested in anthropology, but also very interested in biology as well, and survival. So really, defenses and these things that actually can make up our personality is a lot of times stuff that we just use to get by at one point. And of course, the bigger the trauma, the bigger the defense, and the harder it is going to be to remove. So
what's a big defense versus a little defense then? If you're talking about, trauma.
That's a good question. Yeah, I would say I probably should have said flexible versus rigid.
Okay.
If your parents were, as we sometimes say in psychodynamic therapy, good enough, you'll still have defenses. You might still have a little denial. Everybody has a little repression. In fact, defenses are something that we have to use. We actually develop mature, healthy defenses. So for example, if you've ever flown on an airplane and been able to stop thinking about the fact that you're flying in a speeding metal death tube really high above the earth, driven by a couple of guys that who knows what they're like. You've never met them before, but you're trusting them. What you're doing is you're actually using some denial to shut all those possibilities out of your brain. That's how we can drive. That's how we can do all of this stuff. So that we need healthy defense mechanisms, but those tend to be more flexible. We don't have them all the time. What people that and not everybody, of course, but often people who've experienced trauma will have very much more rigid, consistent defense mechanisms.
Nice.
Yeah, you should work for the marketing campaign for American Airlines. That was such a nice ringtone. You bring up a good point, though, is these defense mechanisms. Like, I find that within the context of maybe a person's past or what they experienced in regard to the trauma, defense mechanism actually made a lot of sense. It probably helped them survive that time in their lives, right?
That's absolutely it. It's something that this is what I try to explain to my clients. And I'll often explain this in a context of couples therapy too, to help one person sort of understand why, their partner has some infuriating personality traits or behaviors or something like that. It's just understanding there was a time, this defense mechanism, there was a time in your life where you needed this. There's a time in your life where this was a good thing for you. And so we don't have to hate it. We don't have to act like, oh boy, am I crazy or whatever. It's like, no, this is a thing that you just don't need it anymore. And you're kind of tripping over it now. And how do we correct that? Think about that. I love talking about these things in couples therapy because it can go from just like you're being fill in the blank to, oh, I get it now, so.
Just want to clarify, sometimes when I bring up the idea of defense mechanisms to clients, they're like, what do you mean I'm not being defensive? Right? There's kind of the terms kind of get interwoven,
Yes.
And someone saying, so if I go to Chris and I say, hey, Chris, that shirt looks ugly. And you say, screw you, buddy. I don't care what you think. That might be being defensive or something like that, right? That's not a defense mechanism, right?
Yeah,
for sure.
Or if I say, hey, Chris, you should have picked me up at the bus stop at 4 o'clock. And where were you? And you're like, I didn't even know about that bus stop. That's defensiveness.
It is defensiveness. And defensiveness happens when we feel like we're in trouble, and we just have the sense of, okay, I have to defend myself here. Defense mechanisms are more of a reflex,
Mm-hmm. They're more automatic.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. What and I love you did a great job of defining kind of why that happens. what do you think it is that we're really defending against? Like, what are the consequences of not defending ourselves, right?
Right. Well, it depends on, in the whole field of psychoanalysis depends on who you ask. But I'll tell you what I think in kind of a general, I think, perspective on it that most people would agree with. We're defending against ourselves, just specifically defending against certain emotions that either would be too difficult to experience, or we fear they'd be overwhelming, or we're defending against doing something that would be unacceptable otherwise. And that's when it kind of gets back to the fight or flight thing. Like sports is an interesting example. So there's a defense mechanism. One of the healthy defense mechanism, the famous healthy defense mechanism is sublimation. It's basically I've been through my analysis and now I'm conscious of these defense mechanisms. And so what they're doing is they're actually protecting me from rage. They're protecting me from desires that might be impolite, that kind of thing. So I need to go express them somewhere else. So Freud would talk about things like creativity, and that's creativity or different things that were outlets for it. It was interesting. He talked about sports as sublimation for our rage and our anger. But he also talked about how sometimes, and this just made me think about some moments from my childhood. He said the sublimation can actually break down and the real feeling punches through, the actual feeling punches through. And I just thought about all the times on the football field or whatever, when kids were getting fights, and things like that. But yeah, so it's really defending, and get back to your questions. It's defending against us doing things that there's another part of our brain that says you're going to get in a lot of trouble if you do that.
Got it. Sure. Okay. Defending against our own emotions, our own, the negative feelings. I mean, it's classic human nature to seek pleasure and avoid pain, and there's something painful that we're trying to avoid at those moments. Not choosing to, but we're reflexively avoiding it. Right.
And this doesn't mean, and I mean, I can imagine some people going, well, we have no control over our behavior. It doesn't mean you don't take responsibility at some point. You do, but it's just, I think it's really important to point out that there is so much about human nature and human behavior that's not a conscious choice. That it's stuff that once we become aware of it, we can try to control it sometimes. But I just think that would promote a lot more empathy.
Yeah.
I heard that the unconscious or implicit mind is a million times more powerful than the conscious mind. So there's so much going on under the surface that we're not aware of, for sure.
Right.
When I think of defense mechanisms, though, I think of that fear jumps out at me.
Yes.
Like we experience so much fear, and I think that's often a driving force as well for initiating these defense mechanisms.
Right.
There we go.
Freud said that our anxiety is basic. Anxiety is a kind of warning that your defense mechanisms are starting to fail. That basically something that you've been able to keep locked up is about to pop out.
Oh, interesting.
Now, I don't know if I don't agree. I think there can be a lot of sources for anxiety. But I think there's something to that that's interesting.
Yeah, indeed.
That is a good point. Well, Steve, you did a good job of talking about a couple of these, but I just think it's fun to go through them in general here. So I've made a little list here. Now, again, I said before that, depending on where you look, there could be a longer list. I have these that are kind of recognized as kind of a general top 10 defense mechanisms here. Then I've listed a few others that are also mentioned, but I thought we might go through these. So you mentioned denial already. Denial being when it's just sort of out of your consciousness. You're, we're not having any problems in our relationship, or no, I'm fine. Everything's okay. And you're just really kind of pushing all of the stress of that away, right?
Right. And things just won't pop up on your radar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You'll just deny. And this can apply to feelings too. Like you just won't experience certain emotions.
Sure.
And you become surprised when that causes a problem, at work or relationships or something like that.
Certainly.
Denial's a big one. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the list and trying to suppress my own instincts, my dad joke instincts, because I'm just trying to, thinking of all these stupid jokes I could make. So I'm gonna have to try and suppress that.
I want to know, Ryan, is there significance to the fact you chose red?
I just didn't want to do basic black. Red was the first color. Maybe there's another reason. I don't know.
I'm just,
Gosh, Brooke.
just curious there.
Ryan, you had a surprised look on your face, or I don't know.
I did?
Yes, you're going like that.
I was going, well, she was asking, gosh, did I have something going on? I don't think I had a particular meaning to it, but I'm open to interpretation.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say something about humor because I was talking about stupid jokes, but.
Oh, well, I would love, no, I was saying this, like, dad jokes are certainly welcome here. I don't have any problem with that. Projection. This is one that's used really a lot in kind of common speak these days, but I'm not sure that everyone understands exactly what it means. Can you shed some light on it, Steve?
It's just, having thoughts or feelings about another person that make you uncomfortable, and then so what you do is you project those feelings, you misattribute them to another person. Let me say that again. I don't think I said it super well. If I'm angry about something but I can't allow those feelings into my consciousness, I might become very sensitive to other people's anger, and be like, oh, why are you so angry? Why are you so angry? When really I'm not. What I'm not doing is dealing with my own anger.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. Or even other feelings, right? I've heard people, someone walks into the office and says, oh, you look really tired today. And the other person's like, what are you talking about? Fine, you're the one that's tired, Right. Or a big one is, you're cheating. You're cheating on me, or you're cheating on this thing. Well, sometimes that's a projection. That's the accuser who's actually cheating, right?
Yeah, or even if they're not cheating, they might have some repressed desires.
Ooh, yeah, a wish, impulse.
Yeah, but they're not dealing with it. They're not aware of it, and so they project that onto their partner.
Certainly. Displacement's one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's a good one. Why is it your favorite? Go ahead.
I don't know. There's just so many good examples of this. This is the example I use all the time is kicking the dog, right? You're mad at your boss at work, and you come home and kick the dog. The dog didn't do anything wrong, but you're displacing that because it feels too scary to confront the boss, perhaps. So you go home and kick the dog, or it's just putting any of those feelings onto something that's different.
Right.
Actually playing, the band playing music on the sinking Titanic, or rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic is an example of displacement.
I had a very difficult couple session one afternoon, and I actually had to stand up and get between them. And in the moment, I was very, very calm. I didn't feel upset. I was completely fine. And then I went home and yelled at my kids for not having done the dishes like I asked. And I was aware of just feeling super irritable. And now I didn't make any connection. Like, I'm mad, I'm going to take it out on them. I was just like, boom. And then immediately I'm like, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
I displaced my whatever I felt, fear or anger, onto my kids. It was anger.
So I could see how people would get projection and displacement a little bit mixed up.
Yeah.
Because it's taking, like, something is then being expressed on something that isn't the actual thing, right? That was really poorly said. But so projection would be more what would you consider that? Projection would be more desires or wishes versus displacement is more emotion?
Yeah, I think projection would probably have more to do with misattribution and like, saying that the feelings I don't allow myself, I'm saying this person has those feelings.
Sure.
Whereas displacement I have a feeling towards something and I can't let it out toward that person, so I'm going to let it out towards somebody else. I think that's probably the difference. But a lot of these are very similar, and I think that's just because they have similar functions and they're all ultimately the same thing.
They're all emotional regulation in some way, right? It's
right.
How did you protect yourself and emotion throughout your life, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very true. Dissociation, which is an interesting one because, there are dissociative disorders,
Yes.
but this is just a defense mechanism of dissociation.
Right. Yeah. I'll tell you a sad but effective example. You'll hear a lot of times people that have gone through some kind of abuse will describe dissociating in the moment, and it's basically your brain's way of this is one function of it. It's of checking out so you don't have to experience what's going on.
Yeah.
And so, somebody will focus, on a candle or a window or something like that takes them out of the experience. And then that kind of carries with them, so it's possible that people will just kind of check out and seem completely disengaged. But yeah, dissociation is a very intense defense mechanism. It's kind of a heavy hitter defense mechanism.
I feel like the concept of dissociation is becoming more mainstream. So I'm hearing for myself 14, 15-year-old clients coming in saying, oh, I'm dissociating all the time. I'm experiencing dissociation or depersonalization. And I'm like, wow, when I was 14, I did not know those words. So it's very interesting. Yeah.
That is, I've actually found, I didn't realize it until right now, but I've experienced the same thing where there's adolescents are coming in talking about dissociation, which I didn't know what dissociation was when I was a teenager. But I don't know if they invented dissociation. I didn't know if dissociation existed when I was a teenager. But anyway,
I don't think I knew what it was when I started graduate school. Oh,
really?
Yeah, that person's just zoning out. No, I had an idea, but certainly have a better idea of it now. But certainly dissociation is just any time of just kind of drifting away. And some clients become very aware of it and could even, I've had clients in the past who've been able to tell me, oh, I'm sorry, that was distressing stuff. I was dissociating for a minute. What were we talking about? Like, can actually be semi-aware of it and own that in that way.
Right.
Yeah. So yes, oftentimes associated with pretty massive trauma. And I mean, I think this is even taught to some military folks, if in case of being caught, trapped, and tortured.
Yeah, tortured. Yeah.
Go in your mind somewhere else so that you're not, in your body feeling that pain.
Right. And that's exactly, well, that's interesting because that's exactly what dissociation does. It tries to get you away from the pain.
Exactly.
And then and the extreme conclusion of that is dissociative identity disorder, multiple personality disorder, where the dissociation results in these full other like protective selves, or different kind of selves. But that's like 7 podcasts right there talking about dissociative disorder.
Great point.
It's multiple podcasts.
So what are you doing next week? What are you up to?
Yeah, we got a few weeks to go.
Okay.
Intellectualization. What might that be?
That's way more common than dissociation. It's basically and it's something we do all the time. It's thinking about something from a purely intellectual, cognitive. It's taking emotion out of the equation. when you're thinking about something, talking about something, or more, most commonly engaging with someone. You just kind of take emotion out of it. And again, this is one of these things that can be adaptive in some situations. There's a Star Trek episode where Data turns off his emotion chip, when they're about to do something scary. And Picard says, "You don't know how many times I envy you being able to do that," because there are times where not feeling things is actually important. The problem is that if you can't get past the intellectualization when it's time to feel things, it'll make your life less rich.
That's a good one. Good explanation there. That's excellent.
Thanks.
I think anytime, when I'm talking with a client about something, say something from their past. Oh, so you were abused by your parents, let's talk about that. And they launch into a very, descriptive, big 3-syllable word sort of a thing. And that's fine. If that's where they're starting, that's fine. But I know that that's intellectualization at play. It's they're really accessing some complex thoughts rather than letting themselves get into the emotion of it.
Yeah.
And I sure it's like a step removed. I'm talking about it, but I'm not really in it because I'm able to describe it like a poet would.
Yeah, one of the things that I should mention, and actually, since we're having this discussion with some Canadian colleagues, something that's made me think of expression of these defenses and the degree to which something is a defense or not can also be very culturally relative, and so like expression of emotion in particular, that's such a culturally relative, dynamic behavior, that how people express emotion, the intensity of the emotion, and obviously stuff like humor, that kind of thing. So it's one thing that I have to remember as a white boy who grew up in Kentucky in the United States. I have to remember, my sense of what's normative, related to everything, first of all, but defense mechanisms is really comes from one place. And so I just kind of have to always remember, somebody in a different place from a different culture, they're going to engage with emotion differently. And so I think that's for all of us who work in mental health, that's something we have to remember. I'm getting a little preachy. It might be time to just send me out of here. I don't know.
You're doing great. It's a great point, Steve.
No, very good points. Yeah, especially as the stigma around receiving therapy improves. I think there's more, maybe folks from different cultural backgrounds more open to entering the process. So you have to be very aware of that. I know up here, I think down south too, obviously very culturally diverse. So it's kind of a constant focus is trying to re-educate yourself or trying to understand those differences.
Right. Yeah,
so you don't pathologize it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Something that gosh, it was a long time ago, Brooke. We were talking about some difference between Canadians and Americans, and you said something about how Canadians are friendly. No, they're polite but not friendly. Was that what it was? Something like that?
Yeah. Sorry, my dishwasher might make a little song telling me that it's over.
Okay.
Just a little heads up to the listeners, if you hear a lovely little chime song, that's what's going on. But yeah, no, more so Vancouverites specifically. Like it doesn't happen everywhere in Canada, but Vancouver is that way. Yeah, we're polite, but we're not friendly. We'll hold the door for you. We'll make some small talk in line. We're not going to invite you over for dinner. We're not going to sit with you and drink the coffee.
Yeah,
we're
except for you
not
two.
going to exchange numbers. Yeah. But we will say hi and chit chat and whatnot. Yeah.
See, that's a definite. I mean, in the difference is in LA, we just won't talk to you in the first place. So that's it. We're not even going to try to.
It's amazing that we're here, Ryan. The fact that an American and a Canadian somehow figured that out together. All the four of us or three of us.
We won't talk to you unless it looks like you might be interested in our screenplay. That's when we might talk to you.
Sure, yeah. Or you're the only one else awake in that moment, right?
Yes.
But
I don't know. Steve, great point about cultural differences. I think you're absolutely.
Yeah. Just on this intellectualization one as well, it's interesting because as I'm pondering that one, part of what we do in regulating emotions, I mean, is name it to tame it, right? We provide some education, we provide some language, so it's such a fine balance, as what I'm reflecting on, between helping someone get in their body and feel their emotion, but also for somebody who's emotionally flooded to be able to access this other part of the brain that is able to intellectualize what's going on, to put it in some sort of framework or schema, so that that emotion is no longer scary. So what a fine balance that we need to create for people.
It is, and it's an ongoing project. That's the other thing, is that I think the idea that someday you're going to arrive and not have to pay attention to your feelings anymore. That never happens. Because you go through different phases of life, and your defenses and your emotions get expressed differently.
So that would be like saying, oh, you're going to get to a stage where you no longer have to pay attention to your bladder. That's just not going to happen. You're going to have to pay attention to your body signals, and you're going to have to learn how to take care of them, right? And you need to know what to do with them.
Right. I think Freud would be right there with that. Yes.
Okay, let's jump to reaction formation. One of my favorite defense mechanisms. Not personally, but I think that's one that's an interesting one.
It's so interesting. So go ahead.
Am I talking this, or Ryan? Do you want to take this one since it's your favorite?
No, man, you go ahead.
All right. Reaction formation is basically when you develop a feeling that is the opposite of the unconscious repressed feeling. Let's say that I have got sexual desires that I'm really, my defense mechanisms are afraid that if they get out, I'll do and say things that will get me in trouble, or I'll go crazy with lust or something like that. So what do? I become very, very conservative. I become very modest. I become very critical of anything that I perceive as immodest, or erotic or anything like that. And there is evidence of what I have just described, like all over the place, So, and I mean, whether we're talking about the television preacher who is very, very critical of all the, sexual things, the media and things like that, and find out this person's up to their own hanky panky and that kind of thing. So we see it a lot. But yes.
Yes, it's presenting a real, it's a reaction formation. You're forming a reaction to what you deem to be an unacceptable urge or feeling, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it can lead to a lot more deviancy or issues as you move forward. It's almost like you're stuffing those, those thoughts, trying to avoid them completely, and then it turns into a way bigger issue as a result.
Yeah, that's it. That's the case with a lot of this stuff. Is it, as long as it festers and grows, it's it allows it to fester and grow if you don't look at the feelings directly.
Absolutely. Repression is an interesting one. Has a little overlap perhaps with denial, but there's kind of a interesting story with repression too, right?
Yes. Repression is basically when your unconscious says this feeling is not surfacing, it's not getting out, whether it's a desire or a fear, that kind of thing. It's just saying, we are absolutely going to pretend like this feeling isn't here, which might be all well and good. In fact, there are times when it is well and good. Repression is, Freud would say, depression is a defense mechanism everybody shares. because we have to have it in order to live with each other in any kind of, civilized society. Otherwise, we wouldn't behave ourselves. And so Freud, it's interesting. Freud doesn't think defense mechanisms in and of themselves are always bad, because in order for people to live together and get, Freud is far more conservative than he's often portrayed in the media. He was for people behaving themselves and being law abiding and doing things for the greater good, and not just expressing all of our desires willy-nilly. And repression is an example of something we all share, we all need. It can become a problem when fundamental emotions that are necessary for relationships, that are necessary to enjoy life, get repressed. And I mean, there's no way around it. Freud talked about repression the most in terms of sexuality and sexual desire. So repression is there to make us keep our clothes on.
To bury the urge, to not let it take over, right?
Exactly.
Is this in the same category as repressed memories, or is that a whole different mechanism, do you think?
I mean, I think there's a lot of overlap. I mean, the repressed memories and repressed memory syndrome, that whole discussion comes with its own set of issues and so forth. But I mean, there is such a thing as a repressed memory. There is stuff that your brain just goes, you know what? Nope, we're not going to catalog this one. It's too awful, at least not in a way that you can easily reach it. So
sure.
And again, it's just an example of how we get, we survive, especially when we're more in a more fragile state as children,
Yeah. Steve and I, just for funsies here, I'll say that Steve and I were actually roommates for 3 years in the 90s. And Steve has just a steel trap of a memory of some of the antics we were up to back then. And there are times when Steve will bring up something and say, "Hey, remember the time we did this?" And I'm like, "What? We did what?"
Are you sure that's repression, or that could be something else?
Yeah.
But,
I'm not sure if it's repression or what, but as far as cataloging all the memories, we don't always catalog every one of them.
Well, yeah, and this gets into the subject of memory, though, which is that's a whole other bag of cats and that kind of thing, how we remember things. But yeah, my kids are 16 now, and I was talking to my son the other day about something pretty scary that happened to him on 4th of July once. And he wasn't that young. He was probably 7 or 8, and he had no memory of it whatsoever, So
yeah,
it's interesting the way our brain tries to protect us.
Yeah, I think is it extreme fear to shut down the hippocampus there, impact memory formation, as well as extreme alcoholism. So I don't know what was going on back there in college, but I'm very curious.
There's just a lot going on back then. It was a crazy day.
Sounds like there was a lot of scary things, Chris.
A lot of scary
things. Intellectualizing. You can.
Yes.
So the final 3 here are actually what had been categorized as the most mature defense mechanisms, and we already mentioned one of them, sublimation. But as far as maturity, meaning like there are these maybe things that you're even a little bit aware of doing,
right,
in order to protect yourself from some negative emotions. And some of these things we even as therapists even will try to teach and encourage people to do, and maybe in conversation, right? Or conversation with a spouse or with a coworker, something like that. You got something negative go on, maybe add a little humor is the next one we're talking about, right? So humor as a defense mechanism is pretty interesting.
I think so. I think it's debatable, the maturity level of it. I think it depends, because I think humor can also be a way, a defense mechanism against aggression.
Absolutely.
Too. You joke about something that actually, there, I mean, we've all either been a part of or seen a joke that had maybe a little bit more of an edge to it than it needed just to be funny. So it can be some expression of rejection, but also humor, yes, can lighten things up. And it's something that Viktor Frankl and his logotherapy loved to use humor, to just basically help regulate and manage feelings that can seem too big otherwise.
You're among friends here, Steve, mentioning Viktor Frankl. Chris here talks about Viktor every other podcast. So
nice.
That. Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing.
We even like humor in a general sense. Like there's a lot of comedians out there who are dealing with a lot of significant mental health issues. They've come forward with some of those concerns. So there's like a bit of a persona there, right?
Right.
It doesn't quite depict or capture what's going on with that individual.
Right. I want somebody to write a book about comedians and mental health. I'll be the first person to buy it, because it's always something. It's something I've always been curious about, but have never kind of had the motivation to really look into it deeply myself. But there's just someone that there's just so many things psychologically that could be interesting. And I love stand-up comedy. This isn't a criticism at all. It's just more someone that does that for a living, and it's this way of being vulnerable without being vulnerable at all, and still being in control. It's just so interesting. Yeah.
When I was in training many years ago, and working with a psychoanalyst actually, and I had a client referred to me who was a comedian, and this psychoanalyst had been in practice for 60 years or something like that, and he said, "I've never met a comedian who wasn't seething with anger."
Anger,
yeah. So this being, humor being this way to deal with maybe some of that anger, or manage it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Or sublimate it, which is the next one we talked about a little bit earlier.
Yes.
Sublimation being finding a more kind of constructive, socially acceptable way to express an urge or an impulse, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the common examples for that is, someone who feels like they need to destroy something, or blow things up. Well, they become a demolition expert for construction companies, or someone who feels an urge to cut people up or dogs up or something like that, and they become a surgeon or a vet.
Mm-hmm.
Or someone who feels like they really, almost have a death wish. They want to push the limits, and so they become a race car driver or something like that. So just this kind of socially acceptable way to gratify some of these urges that may not be acceptable in other contexts.
Okay. Yeah. I'll tell you an interesting example of this. Video games, violent video games in particular. The research is actually very interesting in its inconsistency, because what they find is that with some people, yes, like some studies will show that there are a certain group of people that will be more violent if they play violent video games. But another group of people that tends to be a little larger, there's no association between aggression or not, but they'll report it relieving stress and anxiety and that kind of thing. So this makes me, and this is not a plug for video games as your mental health coping resource necessarily, but it's also not telling you not to do it either, if that makes sense.
I've mentioned on this podcast before, I play Minecraft a couple times a week.
Yeah.
I've created some hotels and spas, and on a really busy day, I'll head down to one of my spas and hang out.
That's awesome.
Beautiful spots. But it is Leonard Sachs, the book Boys Adrift has some interesting things to say about video gaming as well. But yeah, it's interesting or fascinating, isn't it? I just feel the research can never really catch up to how quickly these things are evolving.
Oh, right. Yeah. Minecraft is like the sublimation machine, because you can do everything. You can do anything you want in there and just be so creative, and it's pretty amazing.
You can kill zombies. You can
10, 11
You kill a lot of things if you want to, but or you can build things and be all healthy and creative. It's good. All right, last one here: suppression.
Well, suppression is not a defense mechanism, and here's why: because it's conscious.
Okay.
So suppression is actually a place where you want to be. You want to be able to be aware that you have the feeling and make the conscious choice, basically what to do with it. So, and make a, as Freud would say in psychoanalytic language, a mature choice. So, and it really gets back to what I think a lot of people in mental health, we just call emotional regulation now. That's really what suppression is. It's just that I see that I have this feeling, I'm able to manage it, I'm able to regulate it. And maybe later on, I'll express it more. You know, I might indulge it more, but you know, while I'm on the podcast with everybody, I'm gonna hold my feelings in. You know.
Okay. And it includes awareness and kind of self-control rather than being this automatic thing that most of them do. Okay.
Yeah. So suppression's not a bad thing. We all have to suppress now and then.
Yeah. Yeah. I talk about that sometimes with clients, you know, that's suppression is something that helps society move, you know? I mean, if I got pulled over for a ticket and the police officer's coming up and I really said some of the things I really wanted to, that might not go so well. You have to suppress yourself sometimes. Or, you know, people sitting in a big group of people at church or somewhere else, you know, you kind of have to suppress some things sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is good stuff. I'll just mention a couple also rans just for the heck of it. Because a couple of these are kind of fun. One is conversion, right? The old classic idea of conversion as a defense mechanism, which is interesting, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder, like, I find myself, like, when I'm talking to my students saying this kind of thing a lot, but I wonder what Freud would think now, given, you know, how he describes some things, but just some of the research and science we have now. The guy was a full-on narcissist, but he would change his mind in the face of you know, what he considered good evidence.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, like there's some, like, because he thought, you know, and that's how Freud got his start, was working with people who had, like, famously glove paralysis. You know, you can't feel your hand, but that doesn't make sense because of the way your nerves are aligned in your arm. If you couldn't feel your hand, then you actually wouldn't be able to feel your arm either. So he knew it was completely psychological in nature. And so his theory then, of course, was that there were all these, that it was sexual repression. And so, you know, like, it would just manifest as physical symptoms. But I think I did a little bit of my dissertation research on psychosomatic stuff, and I think it's more complicated than that. But yeah, I could go on forever about this. There's actually a theory that Freud was seeing so many defense mechanisms in his practice because it was a Victorian era when everything was just so locked down and repressed and nobody was expressing emotions. And so it's kind of been theorized that maybe the classic psychoanalytic symptoms and defense mechanisms really did show up more in that era than they would in a society now that maybe, you know, at least in the Western world, is more expressive and open, you know.
Another appeal for cultural sensitivity then, right? Like, maybe these things are showing up differently in different cultures.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious, like, you know, I guess there were some main defense mechanisms that are well documented, but when I think of defense mechanism, it's an ever expansive term. You know, and sometimes you can have some fun with the client in regard to how they describe it, right? Or how they depict it. So for instance, like the build and blow, or the analysis paralysis, or the lone wolf, or the robot, or the jokester, or the you know, I find that every time I meet a client, sometimes there's like kind of unique ones that kind of pop up based on their unique or their experience, you know. So would you consider those, I guess, all defense mechanisms, or do you see there's like a core set of them, and then yeah, how would you?
Yeah, I think, you know, I think even Freud would have acknowledged that this was always developing, And I think he would have been very open to the idea that we're constantly going to be kind of, we're just because everybody is different, and everybody's different, and the human psyche is so messy, you know. And so I think it actually would be a little naive to say, hey, we've got just these defense mechanisms, you know, when people's brains and situations and cultures can come up with new things all the time.
Sure. I totally agree. We agree. There's a lot of different ways to skin that cat. Just one more I want to throw in there, because it seems like it's a later, or it's interesting one. It's undoing, right? This idea of undoing, where I see this in clients often. I see this myself sometimes. This is when you might do something, but then take it back. Basically, you create. You know, I might confront someone. I might say, Brooke, you know, those earbuds look silly, and then take it back immediately and say, oh, but if you like them, that's fine with me. You know, so there's this. It's almost a fear of my own expression that I mitigate immediately and draw it back. And I've seen with many clients working with assertiveness and trying to speak up and have a voice, how sometimes they kind of dig their own grave in some ways. They may put themselves out there, but then they kind of pull it back immediately.
Right. Yeah. It's like undoing is like if something escapes and you're trying to put it big. Yeah. Like no, I didn't mean that. That wasn't real. Just forget, just don't pay attention to that.
Yeah. You're a jerk. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that. That was a joke. You know, something like that where you just kind of shoot your own foot, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, always to protect yourself, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
So the original question had to do with, is are defense mechanisms always bad, or can they be helpful sometimes? And I think we're kind of answering that, but just to be more explicit about it, what's your final say there, Doctor?
I agree with, there's just some ego psychologist named Heinz Hartman. And one of the things that I'm not an ego psychologist, but I've kind of taken to heart just because I see it so often. And this applies to defense mechanisms. It just applies to so much about human personality and psychology, is seeing things as fundamentally neutral. But then depending on each person's, you know, psychology, each person's relationships, etc., the things just they'll work differently, you know, for different people. So there can be times, and there are a lot of defense mechanisms, I think, that most of us would agree, like regression, for example. That's not really a good one. You know, but a lot of, what's that?
Yeah, I don't know that one, why that one wasn't listed, but right, regression.
Yeah, you know, like I'm going to
yeah, you're going to revert to an earlier state in life, basically. You know, for some people, it's like, oh, this is stressful, I'm going to take a nap, right?
Yeah, this, you know, but actually, I'm going to actually argue with myself. I'm just saying that I think that's actually a good example of one that it can go either way. So if you know, it's time for me to take some responsibility in life, and then all of a sudden I regress back into this helpless state, that's not great. But let's say that there are times where I need to not be as intellectual and maybe access a more childlike part of myself. Then regression can be okay, you know. And so I've actually often thought about getting tattooed on the inside of my forearm right here in like holy looking script, it depends, just ellipse. And then just every time my students answer a question, I'll just show them my arm, because it really does. I think it just depends a lot of the time on the person and on what's going on.
So true.
The typical shrink ambiguous answer to something. It depends.
But it does. That's the thing, is it does, you know, and that's the challenge with, and that's why it's hard for anyone to give any sort of broad statement in psychology, you know, oh, depression is because of this, or PTSD happens when this happens. It always depends, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's a very, very relevant field here. All right. Well, guys, any more questions for Dr. Simpson while we have him on?
Well, that was great. That was extremely informative. Yeah, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. Seriously, that means a lot coming from you all, because you guys are, not only are you all bright and insightful, I mean, I think anything that can just make mental health issues and treatment less intimidating for people, more accessible and more fun. I think talking about this stuff is fun and interesting.
Yeah.
And just, and I think that's true. That's one of the things I joke about sometimes is that, everybody's kind of their own amateur armchair psychologist. You kind of have to be in the world. So I think you guys are doing a great thing.
It's classic projection, eh? Classic projection. No,
Yes.
I appreciate it. Yeah. It's kind of fun to come on here and talk about all these topics. I think this is like episode number 59 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Steve, always a good friend of mine, and we have a lot of history together, and I'm sure there are more of my repressed memories that you still recall that could probably be used to blackmail me. So thank you so much for being on the podcast with us.
Sure. Thank you all, Chris, Brooke, Ryan. Thank you all so much for having me.
Absolutely. All right, so we'll sign off for now. That's it. Like and subscribe on Apple, Google, Podbean, Audible, Spotify, Stitcher, or YouTube. Send your questions to info@mentalhealthbootcamp.com unless you repress that or deny that, whatever it might be. Visit us on Facebook or Instagram. Tell a friend or two. And that's it for tonight. See you guys later.
Bye, everybody.
Ciao, Bella.
Bye-bye.